Okay, and we are doing part two of our speed painting for beginners technique. Again, this is not for the old Wargaming masters, most of whom have won painting competitions and know far more about it than I do. This is just to get an army in the field quickly, as I said. So, we're at the point now where we have taken our epoxy and we have used it to stick our figure to the ceramic floor tile base. I would paint, and I always do, paint some black around the edges of the floor tile, but this is a perfectly good color for the surface of it. What you now have is what used to be called a block painted figure, and that was just a figure where uh, each color was represented by a solid color on the miniature. You'll see that a lot with a lot of the old toy soldiers, like Britain's models, Starlux plastic models. For any of you who are aficionados of old toy soldiers and H.G. Wells era wargaming and that kind of thing. Except for the, as I said, we're going to dry brush over what's probably the largest area on the figure. In the case of the Tuareg here, that's he's largely black, and you're going to want to dry brush the purple or blue or something over him. You don't do that over white. You never, ever, ever dry brush over white. White is the miniature painter's nightmare color. It is the hardest one to work with, and essentially the rule is that it's much easier to work with the darker colors and the metallics than it is to work with lighter colors. Yellow and white both are just very, very difficult colors, but there are ways to bring out some detail in them. And that gets into the next thing we're going to talk about. If you look at this fellow here, even though my, let's see if I can push him out there a little bit, because uh, my camera is just not, well, you can sort of see, despite his white uniform, that he's got little areas of shading on him, such as his where the fold in his elbow is. You can see a black area there. You can sort of see a black area between his leg and his right leg and the horse's right flank, and those are created by a process that's called dipping. It's pretty modern. It is not something that was done in olden times, but it's very effective. For that, you use this. This stuff is what wargamers call the dip. It is Minwax poly shades, stained in polyurethane in one step. You can get this at virtually any hardware store. You usually want the shade that I am showing here, that is Tudor satin. There's a Tudor gloss and a Tudor satin. You usually want the satin color. Even that makes a higher gloss than many wargamers like, but it is a much lower gloss than the actual gloss color, which just kind of shines like a Marine's jump boot. You're going to want that. You are going to want, if you can get them, some rubber hospital gloves. And you want that because you're actually going to be dipping the solid piece into into the Minwax polish shades. And what you're doing at this point, and a lot of guys disagree on this and say, no, you shouldn't dip you shouldn't dip them. You should brush the stuff on. I just haven't had as good results with that. And and this stuff looks pretty good. Yeah. So my suggestion is that you dip the figure, and you just do that. You take the painted figure, mount it on his base with epoxy. And if he's been sitting around for a while, you want to dust him off with a feather duster or something first. You don't want that stuff dust getting into the dip. And then you just take the entire figure, you dip him in there, you pull him out. You wear one of these rubber gloves, as you do it. And the reason for that is it's just nasty stuff. It's hard to get off your hands. And I've heard rumors that it's got carcinogens in it and all this kind of stuff. I don't know the truth of that. Everything's supposed to have carcinogens anymore. But anyway, you go ahead and do that, and you've got a pretty good mess on your hands. You will pull the figure out, and you will say, oh my God, you bastard, what did you have me do? I've been working on this figure, and now I have a black glob in my hands. Well, yes, you do, but only for a short period of time. You set the figure off on a piece of cardboard or a piece of wood or something, You want to let it dry for a while, not until it is completely hardened, just until it's dry enough on the surface. Usually take about 6 hours, depending on humidity. You want it till it's dry enough on the surface that you can pluck the figure back up off of the wood or the cardboard or whatever you've got it on, and wipe the bottom of the base dry a little bit with a paper towel or something, and then set it back down again in another dry area. And the reason for that is if you let this stuff sit until it is fully dry, it hardens like glue, and you now have something that is fully adhered to the cardboard or the wood or whatever, and it's just a pain in the behind to get it off. The ultimate effect that that is going to have is it's going to get down in all the little cracks and runnels of the figure. Looking at these cavalry, you can see where that's happened, and it's going to shadow that area. It's going to make that area black, and it'll shade it a little bit, up into the figure itself. So you kind of get on these white figures. You can see how on the highest parts they're almost pure white, not completely. They darken a little bit, but that's fine. Soldiers on the battlefield never have perfectly clean uniforms after about the first 5 minutes anyway. And it is a cure for some of the problems that you run into with whites, and how difficult it is to shade them, etc. So at this point, once you have let it sit for about 6 hours, let the base dry. Then you go ahead and you put you put it onto another hard area that is completely dry, and you let it sit for about another 18 hours. So you've let it sit for about 24 hours altogether. At that point, it should be completely dry. Now, it's very important when you're drying a figure like this, you want to put it in an area where air isn't moving around a lot, because dust in the air is going to move around, and you can get pieces of hair, and especially if you have pets in the house, you can get all kinds of stuff cluttering up your figures, and they can really end up looking like crap. If you have an old oven that is not plugged in, that nobody is going to use, I've learned from hard experience what happens when you put it into an oven that is in use, and somebody comes along while you've wandered off somewhere and preheats the thing to 450 to toast a cheese sandwich or something like that. It's not pretty. So anyway, you let it harden completely at that point. Okay. Do you have a finished figure now? No, you do not. Okay. Why do you not? Because after the figure is painted, you are invariably going to find things about it that you don't like. Okay, you're going to find changes you want to make, and that's fine. You can you can paint over the dip a little bit with enamels or with acrylics. And by the way, the reason you want to use acrylics is because the dip is oil-based and enamels are oil-based, and you're not going to have a problem with acrylics if they're dried completely. You're not going to have a problem with acrylics running into the dip, or softening, or the dip softening acrylics or anything like that, as you can conceivably have with enamels. But once the dip is completely hardened, it doesn't matter if you're going to paint over it a little. It can be enamel or acrylic or whatever you like. But especially with these figures, you're going to find that there may be areas, especially low points on the figure, that where the dark black dip will pool and create some ugly looking stuff. It doesn't really matter. I will show one of these here. I'm still working on this set a little bit. I had some really nasty, I don't know if it's even worth trying to show it, but I had some really nasty darkening on the horse's forefoot over here. And all I did was I took some of the original gray paint, I painted it back over that. I made a little bit of a wash. I just mixed a little black paint with some alcohol and just kind of washed it over that, and it looks fine, And where white is concerned, if you're getting areas of white paint that are too heavily dipped, you just brush some white back over it, and then between the white and some black washes or washes of other colors. Washes don't have to be just black. You can make brown washes. For science fiction figures, you can make metallic green, metallic blue washes. Whatever you feel you need. But But once you've gone ahead and washed the figure over, you can find your balance, and all of this is about just trying to find what you want. So I thought that this would be a kind of a nice force to show as an experiment for this, because these sort of generic Muslims, the cavalry those could be Sikhs, or maybe in the service of the Ottoman Turks or some of the Middle Eastern nations. The purple Arab figures could be Tuaregs, or which are just essentially deep desert Arabs or Berbers. We have some white Arabs there, and we have the green-hatted figures with the white jackets and the brown bare feet. Those are probably dervishes, servants of the Mahdi. But all these are fairly generic, and you can find excuses to put them into various armies. The dervish figures could also probably work fairly well for Italian Ascaris, which would be native Africans serving the Italians. Well, that's about enough for now. Hope you enjoyed the vid.